Hello, everyone. I'm John Wowak, COO of Superman Compliance Services. I'm here with Jay Haas, the Director and Chief Compliance Officer in our core compliance group. We wanted to take some time to go over some of the best practices on how to manage a regulatory exam. So, Jay, now that we've been notified and we got the initial call from the regulator, what are some of the things that we should be doing and looking at?
Yeah, thanks, John. I think it's important, first and foremost, to share with your senior management team, that you've received the call and that an examination is pending, and that the regulators are going to be looking to spend some time probably in your office. So obviously, you want to prep them, give them a heads up as far as what you've gleaned from that conversation. Initial conversation with the regulators as far as what their focus areas are going to be, and possibly even getting into the amount of time that they're going to be physically in your space. You want to coordinate with your senior management team as well regarding who's going to be in charge of managing the examination and establishing a quote-unquote gatekeeper who will, like I said, manage the exam, take care of all of the information and documentation requests that you receive, and help schedule and coordinate any conversations that the examination team may want to have with some of your subject matter experts that are in-house that can answer some of their more specific and more detailed questions.
So, Jay, now that we have the document and information request in front of us, what advice would you give on how best to manage that process and document exchange with the regulator?
Yeah, so, again, I think it's important to communicate internally with your subject matter experts and delegate some of the responses to those experts to help you gather the information. Again, I think it's very important to have a gatekeeper as the central person in the firm to help coordinate that information and to keep track and make sure that all of the requests are being fulfilled. I also think it's important to discuss with the regulators and establish timelines as far as when they could expect to receive the documentation from you. I think the old adage of under promise and over deliver is great advice to abide by here. It shows that you're responsive to the requests and that you have the information readily available and can produce it on demand. I think it's also important for the gatekeeper to maintain copies or a file of all documentation that's been provided to them, just to eliminate any confusion or instances of, well, we didn't get this or we didn't receive that. You can go back to your file and be able to produce and show that you did do that. And finally, I think it's important for the gatekeeper to perform somewhat of an independent review of the documentation that you do receive to give to the regulators. My experience has been, a lot of times some of the subject matter experts include details on documentation that's not really self-explanatory or may not be responsive or may even be additional information that they didn't ask for. So taking a few minutes to review the documentation from an independent, quote-unquote independent perspective, and making sure that it is responsive and fully answers the questions, I think is important.
Thanks, Jay. And I think one of the do not do or something you should stay away from is while performing that quality control review, you do not want to alter or change any of the information based on the books and records. You want to provide them the historical or archived information. And if you need to change or clarify something, do that in a separate communication. By no means should you be altering something in the past. Regulators will have the field day with stuff that you've changed that should have been archived or something in your files that you're trying to provide to them. So we always advise clients to provide in the original form. If you need to provide additional clarification or updates, you should do that separately.
Agreed. And I think ideally, the documentation that's being requested should be documentation that you already have on file. So it shouldn't be anything that you have to create from scratch specific to this exam. So, if that's the case, then you probably want to have a conversation with your team internally to figure out why, in fact, you had to do that.
So Jay, now that the exam is kicked off and it's showtime, they're either coming into the office or coordinating it remotely. What are the best practices, or what advice would you give to me as your client to help manage this part of the exam?
Sure. So, I think first and foremost, and it's kind of obvious from a security perspective, if they are going to be physically in your space, you want to get names of all of the people on the examination team that are going to be in your office. Obviously, so you can let them into the building, but also just so you're aware of who's going to be there and who you can expect on a daily basis. I've also found having a conversation with them regarding the hours that they're going to be working and when you can expect them to be there every day is a good thing to do. My experience has been that they tend to tailor their schedules to your schedule and your hours, which it should help you coordinate and set time up for them. So that's usually not an issue, but again, you just want to make sure that you have people physically in your space while they're physically in your space. I've also found that it's helpful to sit down when they do arrive and kind of set some guidelines or some protocols for communication with them. I've found that having a daily check-in, whether it's in the morning or at the end of the day, just to sit down and talk about the requests that they've given you, provide a status update, again, establish some expectations as to when they can receive information. It gives you an opportunity to ask some clarifying questions if you're not quite sure what they were asking for, or give them the opportunity to ask some clarifying questions on documents that you have produced, just to eliminate any confusion. It also gives you the opportunity during that exchange to identify any people that they would like to speak with internally, and you can start to coordinate and set up times that would work to have those types of interviews or discussions with those people. And then finally, having those conversations can also help clarify the format of the documentation that they're looking for. So if it's an Excel file, if that's sufficient, you can clarify that. Or, sometimes I've experienced, where they've requested email files, and those can be rather voluminous, as you can imagine. So, if you have a third party, you may, have them either submit the documentation directly to them or download it to a disk or a hard file, something like that, and just clarify with the examination team to make sure that that's appropriate and satisfies their requests in that regard.
So Jay, we get asked all the time, what should we be doing as we're preparing for this on-site or virtual exam with the exam staff? And we try to articulate some of the things or experiences we've had from other clients that may come back and bite them in a deficiency or findings letter. So can you go over some of those things and some of the best practices for preparing, or some of the things we should be doing internally before the exam kicks off?
Yeah, sure. So after you receive that initial call that an examination is going to occur, I think it's a great idea to review your policies and procedures or your written supervisory manual to make sure that you're doing what you say you're doing in that manual. I always say when I deliver training to my clients that that document, the compliance manual or WSPs are really the backbone of your compliance program, and it's really where the examination team is going to start. It's going to be one of the first items they ask for and start to do their reviews based off of that information. So it's always a good idea to review your policies and procedures, have your all of the identified people within the manual review that as well, so that they're fresh and current on what those procedures say. Additionally, I think it's very important, if you've had a previous examination, to take a look at what the findings were in that exam. My experience has been they always follow up on any issues that they had in a previous examination. So while you should have addressed that in your response letter um, during that previous exam, again, you just want to make sure that what you said you were going to do is actually in place, or you've taken steps to correct those deficiencies that were noted in the previous exam. I also think it's important to have some conversations internally uh, with both your management team as well as with all of your employees. To notify them that the examination is going to be conducted and that there's going to be some strangers in your office for a period of time. I think it's important to notify or inform your employees or remind them rather of maintaining a clean desk policy and not leaving a lot of work papers on their desks, especially at night, making sure that everything's locked up and secure. You certainly don't want to give the impression that you're not taking the privacy of client information seriously. Another thing to consider or to remind your employees of is hallway conversations. So, you're going to have these strangers or these individuals in your office, probably walking around a little bit, going to lunch and coming and going a little bit. So you would just want to make sure that any conversations that they're having in a public space are kept to a minimum and that they're not discussing a lot of firm business out in the quote unquote public areas. You're going to want to take some time and figure out where you want to locate your examination team. If you have a central conference room, that's probably an obvious choice. But again, making sure that you're kind of isolating them to that area and keeping them in that area, I think is important so that they're not wandering around your office needlessly. You're probably going to get requests from the examination team for reviews from some of your supervisors and subject matter experts. So you're probably going to want to take a little bit of time to prep them and have discussions with them prior to them going in and speaking with the regulators. Now, again, it's not an on-the-record testimony that they're going to be giving when they're talking to them while they're in your office or anything formal like that. But again, you just want to remind them, answer the questions, give them the information that they're asking for, but it's not necessary to volunteer any additional information or things that they haven't asked for. So, keep your answers directed to the questions that have been asked, kind of keep them short and sweet, but make sure you are being complete in your responses and giving them the information that they're looking for. I think it's vitally important to have during the initial conversation when the examination team shows up, to have someone from senior management there and present at that meeting. It shows engagement on their part, and I think it helps show that they're taking the compliance piece of the business seriously. So having them there is always a good idea, in my opinion. And having them, kind of prepping them before they come in, to be able to give a high-level overview of the business and the products that are being offered through the business, and being able to quote-unquote educate the examination team on what it is you do on a daily basis. Unfortunately, I think we spend a lot of time educating the examination teams when they come in on what we do and how we do it. But again, if you take a little bit of time and prep and have kind of a script as to what you want to say and how you want to describe your business will go a long way. I've also found that having an organizational chart available during that initial conversation is helpful. Again, it helps identify who's in charge of specific business areas and who the examination team could potentially look to gather additional or more detailed information.
Thanks, Jay. That is extremely helpful and a good overview of some of the real things that we're seeing out in the field. So now that we finally got the exam team off the premises, or the initial on-site review is done, Jay, what are some of the expectations of managing an open exam once they have left the field?
Sure. So, typically before they leave, they'll have a brief conversation with you and hopefully give you an overview of any issues that they may have identified during their time in your office. Typically, though, you can expect to receive some additional phone calls possibly emails where they ask some clarifying questions or maybe even request some additional documentation. So again, I think it's imperative, to establish with the examination team prior to their departure who those requests should go to and who they should be directed to, so that you can coordinate and ensure that those responses are taken care of in a timely manner. And then finally, when they conclude their reviews of everything in their investigation, you can expect to receive some sort of written communication from them summarizing the findings or recommendations that they have identified during the examination, which you'll be afforded an opportunity, typically 30 days, to respond to that in writing and give them any clarifying information or any steps that you may have already taken, which I think is important if you can, to rectify any issues that were identified.
Thanks, Jay. I think that's a very good summary, and I really appreciate you going over some of the things. If I was ready to experience my first exam, I think it was very helpful. Thanks a lot.